Well, my beautiful, super shiny deck is now buried in dust. It's still shiny. It's just hidden under all of this dust. So what we've done, as you can see, I've got tape here along the shear line, but this time we're taped from the subdeck up and also taped from the white boot stripe down. If we drop down below here, there you can see the blue tape. So I masked off my boot stripe all the way around, masked off the shear line from the subdeck up all the way around, masked off the bow eyes on the rear of the transom, as well as my new drain, I guess we'll call them through holes. Masked those off, and then I sanded all of this with 220. So this is still bare epoxy out here from when the hull was upside down 2 frickin' years ago. But again, 3 coats of epoxy on the hull. So I sanded that with my random orbital with 220, just like I prepped the epoxy on the deck, same grit. Everything that I could get with that random orbital, I did. When I reached a point where I could no longer get the random orbital into it, then I came back and I hand sanded, to get close up to the tape line and stuff like that. Hand sanded around all the stainless fittings on the transom. And we'll go back there and take a look at that too. You can see we're all taped off. Anyhow, I hand sanded all of this. There you can see we're taped off. And then I came back with Scotch-Brite, again, the red, very fine. And I roughed up right up to my tape edge with the Scotch-Brite. And then once, just a real quick over the entire surface with Scotch-Brite. I then peeled all of my original tape off and wiped everything down with denatured alcohol 2 or 3 times, then retaped it off with fresh, nice, crisp edge tape because, there's some spots where it was abraded on from the sandpaper. So anyhow, retaped everything off, and I'm going to let this sit. Of course, this entire thing was covered in dust floating in here. So I'm going to let it sit a few more hours, and then I'll come and tack rag this off tonight. Let it sit overnight, tack rag it one more time in the morning, and we'll get the first coat of varnish on the sides and transom rolled and tipped on tomorrow morning. So that's where we're at. So this is the following day. I peeled all of my tape off. For the first time ever, I let the tape stay on there until the varnish had cured for a day. I've never done that before. Generally, I always peel it off immediately after I apply it. But I wanted to see how the tape would peel off after the varnish was cured, and it came off perfect. No issues. So I think it's actually a better method after you've taped stuff off for varnish and you've varnished over it, just to let that tape stay on there, let the varnish cure, then come back and peel it off. Because you don't run the risk of accidentally knocking dust in your fresh varnish, trying to peel tape when everything's still wet. So that method worked great. Let's take a look. Look at the side of that thing. Holy crap. I am so freaking proud. And this is the first coat of varnish. I mean, you can see the heater reflecting back here in it. And it is like that. Of course, you can't see here. This looks like dust. This is gloss. Up here. This is a reflection of my trailer jack and all this stuff down here. It's just like a mirror. Like a mirror. So we'll get down here. There you can see the gloss, see it? It is super pretty. So we'll go take a look down the other side. And again, the top's still covered in dust. It looks like crap, but under this dust, it looks just like the sides. I don't dare wipe it down. When I've got my 3 coats on here, I'll jack the trailer back up, put the wheels on it, drag the boat outside, and rinse the deck off with water. Anyhow, I'll drop down here. There she focused. You can see the gloss. It's just like a mirror. I mean, all the way down. Super, super happy with that. There you can see, right in here is where my ply joint is. You can see it. But hey, I can live with that. Very, very impressed. Just super high gloss. And again, this is the first coat. So then we'll come back to the back of the boat and the transom. I peeled all the tape off all of my fittings. I mean, well, there's me in the camera, if that doesn't tell you. I mean, pretty dang shiny. And again, this is cured, you know. This isn't wet. So then we'll come around the back of the transom. What do you think? Not too shabby, huh? So yeah, I'm very happy with it. It's like, I swear it's not me, it's the varnish. So the only thing I did differently on the sides of the boat, holy crap, so pretty. The only thing I did different on the sides of the boat than when I was varnishing the top surface, exact same method. I rolled the varnish on with a 6-inch foam hot dog roller, little mini roller, and I tipped it with a brush. But the difference is, on the top of the deck, I used a bristle brush because there's a much less likely chance of getting a run on a pretty flat surface. However, on the sides, I used a foam brush, 4-inch wide foam brush to tip the bubbles. And I did that because watching other varnishers, they talk about using a foam brush to put down a thinner film, and I thought that would be beneficial to aid in not getting runs if I tip the bubbles out with a foam brush, just to keep that layer very, very thin. I think I'm also going to modify when I get ready to sand this. I'm going to let it set another day, probably, maybe 2 more days, just to get a good cure. It's hard now. I could probably sand it, but why risk it? You know, it turned out fantastic. But I think instead of sanding with 320 between coats, because this is a vertical surface, because the coat is thinner, I think I'm going to sand all of this with just red Scotch-Brite, just scuff it basically, because it's a thinner coat. And if I come across a run, I will sand the run out, although I haven't seen any yet. But I think I'm just gonna scuff the whole thing with red Scotch-Brite, no sandpaper. And you know, then I'll again peel my tape, remask it, and put a second coat over the top of just the Scotch-Brited surface. But if I can get the third coat to turn out as good as the first coat, and again, in theory, it should only turn out better. But if I can get the third to turn out as good as the second, I am one happy camper. So that's where we are. I'm not going to bother boring you with updates of the second coat, but we'll just show you a final of the third coat. So that's where we are. Man, I am impressed. Captain's varnish is the shiznittle. So today we're doing a little bit of lake recon. This lake is at about 35 miles from my house, and this is called Loon Lake. And during the winter months it closes down. There's a resort over here. You can see all of this sand. They actually truck sand in and push it all around and make a nice sandy beach swim area. And then I believe over here you can dock boats on the beach. But anyhow, the ramp is over here along with the floating dock. It's kind of hard to see. But another month or so, they'll pull all this sand down and sand the beach. It's really nice. It's normally about 75 or 80 degrees up here in the summertime. Now, I've never been to this lake, but heard lots and lots of people talk about it. But that's it. We're kind of up on top of a hill right now. The lake continues on around me here, on around the bend here, and it's a small lake. It only goes about another 1.5 miles or so around this corner, 2 miles. Not very big, but very nice. It's incredibly windy in town at my house right now, but because this lake is surrounded by hillside, it's pretty protected. It's calm. There's no whitecaps. It's not quite a pond flat, but it's pretty darn flat even for being substantially windy in town. So, little lake recon. This is where I'm planning on launching the Zip. So this is clear down at the other end of the lake. This is about 1.5 miles away or so. And this is the boat launch. Another boat launch. Nice little dock. It's not very wide, but you can see the serrations in the concrete here, so it should be a decent place to launch. This is probably where I'll launch from to stay away from the resort. Looks pretty nice out here. Boat launch fee, $7. Well, what's another $7 for this project? Docks look nice. They look like they're well taken care of. Well, here it is. This is 3 coats of varnish, and you can see the results. I mean, it looks every bit as good as the first coat. It's actually better than the first coat. But things just like a mirror. Again, there's the reflection up here on the bow of my bow stop and my winch on the ground. It just looks really, really nice. Really high gloss, no runs. Turned out great. Of course, the top of the boat's covered in dust. And we'll drop down this side, and again, just like a mirror everywhere you look. So very, very happy with it. So I think the hull is officially done with varnish, at least for this year. Enough to get her in the water, that's for dang sure. So onto the motor well. So I skipped a little bit ahead here. This is the second coat of varnish now on the motor well. Basically, I'm putting it on with a foam brush because it's such a small area. The first coat in here, it took me 2 hours to sand and get the first coat in because the bare epoxy, although I didn't see it, it had runs all over the place and bumps and imperfections, and it actually took quite a bit to sand it flat before it was ready for varnish. So 2 hours to get the first coat in there. I let that sit 24 hours, came back, it was ready to sand today, sanded it, and applied the next coat, and you can see it. Just like a mirror. We'll come over here. Yeah, just like a mirror everywhere. Looks super nice. So this is coat number 2 in the motor well now. And let this sit a day. This is still wet, just put it on, half hour ago. But tomorrow after work, 1 more sand, 1 more coat, and I think we are officially done with varnish at that point. Oh, one more thing. For the record, the sides of the boat, the varnish, oh, look at that thing. It's like glass. It took 12, or yeah, just shy of 12, 11 to 12 ounces of varnish to do a coat all the way around the sides, including the transom. We'll come back and look at the transom. Mirror, look at that thing. Super, super happy with it. Anyhow, 12 ounces of varnish to do a coat all the way around the outside of the boat. So that's where we are. We're down to 1 more varnish coat in the motor well. And again, just mirror-like. And we'll move on. All right, finally, windshield brackets showed up. So they're a 4-piece bracket. There's 2 sides, and then there's a split center. It's a 2-piece center. So basically, this will go out on one edge, that'll go out on the other edge, and then there'll be glass panes between them. They are rough cast. It's exactly what I expected. It's a green sand cast. So that's completely normal as far as the finish on it. I do plan on sanding these out and polishing them, but I am very disappointed in, I would say, the flashing removal and some of the grinding sanding work that they did after they came out of the mold. Pretty dang disappointed in it. It's hard to tell. I would expect to see this flashing in here, but it's like they just hit it real quick on a drum sander and burned into this bracket a little bit. Over here, you can see the gouges where they hit like a belt sander or something, taking some of the flashing off. I actually would have preferred that, they wouldn't have taken any flashing off at all, and I would have done that work instead, because it's going to take some work to make these things smooth again. We'll look back here on this edge. Some of it's nice, some of it's really, half-ass. You can see, you know, the edge here, how they kind of ground a flat spot in it, so I'll have to make that round again. And again, I completely expected the inside and the outside cast to look exactly like it does. That doesn't bother me. What does bother me is some pretty shoddy sand work on this stuff, some grind work cleaning the flashing up. So anyhow, we get past that. Then we've got these center brackets. If you take a look, the hole is off center. It's off center by about a 1/16 of an inch. On the front, you flip it over, it's even worse on the back. Look at that. That's got to be at least an 1/8 inch off centered. I mean, I know it's difficult to drill a straight hole with this upright in the way. I get that. You know, drill it from the bottom and then angle your countersink back, not right or left. I can't understand that. Now, it gets worse than that, though. Take a look. Take a look at that gap underneath the bracket. I mean, that's no good. And then we come up to the top of the bracket, and the rear is raised above it over a 1/4 inch tall. You can see here's some sand casting defects. I can work with that. That's okay. But it would appear that where they drilled and tapped for the screws in the front on this rear piece, that they just drilled and tapped them off. So I'm going to have to take these screws out and level this thing up, slide the base down, re-drill the backside and tap it so that it sits flush, so that this gap's gone. I'll hit it on my disc to flatten it, and then whatever excess is sticking up above this piece, then I'll just take off. But there is quite a bit of work in cleaning up these brackets. On top of that, take a look at the offset. This piece isn't square. The front isn't square to the rear. You can see it's sticking out to the right here and sticking out to the left here. So I'm kind of disappointed for the money spent on these things. I can work with them. Again, I'm a metal worker, so this is right up my alley. When I'm done with them, they'll be beautiful. They'll be absolutely beautiful. But it's going to take some work to get them there. So kind of disappointed. Just like always, though, when they're done, they'll be beautiful. Well, it is officially May 1st, 2018. For the month of April 2018, we went up 26¼ hours. Of that 26¼ hours, 18 of it was varnish, so that brings our varnish up to 95. And the remaining 8¼ was polishing the windshield brackets. So I just put that on miscellaneous, so we're now at 19 hours for miscellaneous. We went up $327.05 this month. That's not actual money spent this month, but I did include the cost of the brackets, which were ordered clear back in February. So that's the large majority of this month's spending was on the brackets. But again, they showed up, so I finally included that cost in the dollar spent this month. $327.05. So 26¼ hours, that brings us up to 989 hours. Actually 989¼ so it's looking like this month, May, we're gonna crest that 1,000-hour mark. Wow, I did not expect to be at 1,000 hours. But anyhow, our 26¼ hours, that brings us up to 989¼ hours, and our $327.05 brings us up to $10,803.45 invested. So we're just about at that $11,000 mark, but there's really not a lot left to buy. So anyhow, that's where we are. Let's check out our progress. So again, ignore the gigantic mess. But this is, look at those brackets now. Much, much, much better. Again, this isn't finished. I would say that these are probably about 70% polished, but man, talk about a difference. I mean, they are substantially better when they arrived. And again, I had to do a ton of work to this center support bracket. You can see that the height is now right. There's no more giant step in the bottom. It's completely flush. I did have to re-drill and re-tap the factory holes that they drilled and tapped, and they were almost 1/4 inch exactly off. So anyhow, that's all done now. And again, they're not perfect. They are far from perfect, but that's quite a substantial difference in finish than when they arrived. So still have more polish work to do on them, but the vast majority of it is done. Very, very happy with the outcome. Yeah, so that's where we are on that. And ignore my mess. So I made a list of what I have left to do. If everything goes according to plan, I should be about 90%, maybe 98% done with the zip at the end of May. If everything goes according to plan. So this is my list of what I need to get done this month. It looks like a lot, but you know, some of these are just 2-minute tasks, 1-minute tasks, 4-minute tasks. So a large majority of this I could do, I think, in a 2-day weekend. So it looks like a lot. It is a lot, but none of it really takes that long. So I'm not going to give like any kind of like tutorial about how to polish rough cast aluminum or any of that, but I will talk about the tools that I use to do it. To start with, some of these flat surfaces, especially on this front bracket, you know, it had a banana to it. It was bowed, and it was about a 1/16 of an inch. To flush flat those, I just used my disc sander. Put it on the bench and just kept sanding and sanding and sanding until I could see a uniform sand all the way down one side and knew they were flat. And I kept checking it with my straight edge over here. There's the tap I used after I drilled the new holes in the correct location. And in case anybody's wondering, that is an 8-32 on the thread pitch for these brackets. So anyhow, after I got, you know, the sides of the center support bracket, got them flushed up, and basically sanded the banana out of it. I tried a couple of different methods. I tried using my random orbital with 80 grit. It was okay on this bigger bracket, the center bracket, but you couldn't get it into a lot of areas. So really, I only used the random orbital and 80 grit for about 5 minutes before I ran out of area. At that point, I moved over to, and again, excuse my huge mess, this. This thing has saved my bacon so many times on this boat build. It's just an oscillating multi-tool. You know, I've used it with all sorts of bits in the boat build. Incredibly, incredibly handy. This is a cordless version. You know, when they first came out, they were just crazy expensive. I think Fine out of Germany built them. But, you know, since the patent expired, now everybody on the planet makes them. You can even pick them up, a corded version, through Harbor Freight for about 20 bucks if you want one. So this is what I use to do the remaining probably 95% sanding on my windshield brackets. And I started with 60 grit, started sanding them down with 60 grit, basically taking all the rough cast marks, and then any place where they accidentally burnt or ground into the bracket too far, I started working with that thing. And because of that triangular shaped pad, it gets everywhere. So really, I can't think of a better tool than that oscillating multi-tool. After I went through it with 60 grit, then I put on a 120 pad, went over the entire surface again. After the 120, I went to 220. After the 220, I went to 320. After the 320, I went to 600. After the 600, I went to 1200. And at 1200, you're starting to get a really dull shine on it. And at that point, I started polishing them. Now, originally, I was using my little 6-inch buffer. That's the same buffer that I used on, exact same buffer I used on my stainless cutwater. It works. It's slow, but it works. But I had remembered that I had a buffing wheel that I had purchased like 15 years ago in a 4-pack down here. I had a buffing wheel for my grinder. So I bolted it up, and at the time I had the rear guard on here, and I was working on polishing parts, but every now and then it would grab it and suck it into that guard and scratch it or put a ding in it or dent it, and crap, now I got to resand it out and start over again. So after doing that about 5 times, I finally got tired of it and pulled the guard off so it's completely unobstructed and never an issue since. But anyhow, that's all I'm doing. A little bit of Mother's mag and aluminum polish, wiping it on my parts, and then just, you know, with light pressure, buffing the part out to a like mirror finish. So that's what I'm doing. You just keep stepping your way through the grits, sanding to get, you know, finer and finer and finer scratches, and then hit it on the buffing wheel. I mean, and these aren't done. Again, these are about 70% done, maybe 80. They're substantially better than they were, but not finished. Like I told you, they're gonna be beautiful. I told you. So that's where we are. The final coat of varnish. We'll just go in there and check it out. So this is a long-winded finish of the video, but again, everything's covered in dust. But the final coat of varnish is done in the motor well. And it's, I mean, you can see it. It's just like a mirror. Totally dry, ready to use. Like a mirror. So that's where we are. The next step is to get the cut water installed permanently, 4200. Install the cut water on the bow. Remount up my bow stop. Officially weld the bow stop down to the trailer. Jack the trailer up. Grease the wheel bearings. Put the wheels and tires on. Pull down my painter shanty. Open the garage door and roll this baby out. For the first time, it's going to see daylight this month. I'll take all of my paper and crap out of here, roll it outside, completely vacuum clean the inside of the boat, and then we'll hose down the entire deck, all the sides, wash and thoroughly dry the entire exterior of the boat, roll it back in the garage, and start final assembly. Man, I'm getting excited. We are almost there. May is going to be a fantastic month. My goal is to get this thing 90% done, 98, 99% done. If everything goes according to plan, it should be water ready on the June 1st video. Keep our fingers crossed. So that's where we are. We're making fantastic progress. We are at the finish line. I can see the checkered flag. So thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, rate, and comment. And we will see you guys June 1st with the... I won't say it. But we'll see you June 1st with an update of building the Zip. Maybe the last, maybe not.